Mr. Don Green, who's the executive director of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, was the driving force behind the book. But I kind of like to think that I was the person who inspired the book. I've been researching Napoleon Hill for many years, and it dawned on me one day that Napoleon Hill had given a speech to Salem College not too far from where I was living. And I wondered whether or not the speech had been recorded and preserved in the files of the library there. So I called the librarian, and she did a little research of their files and called me back and said, yes, they did indeed have a copy of Napoleon Hill's 1922 commencement address that he'd given in Salem College. Now that's kind of an interesting keynote because Senator Jennings Randolph was in that class. And of course, Senator Jennings Randolph just graduated from college and went on to become not only a U.S. Senator, but also president of TWA. Quite a remarkable man in his own right. So she had a copy, and she asked me if I wanted it, and I said yes, and yes indeed. She printed the copy off and sent it to me. Well, it turned out that the copy that I got had come from a microfilm, and it had been a photocopy of a local newspaper where the speech had been reproduced. And it had been this big when it was printed, but it was now 8.5 by 11, and I couldn't read it without a magnifying glass. So I did. I got a magnifying glass and I read it, 1 word, 2 words at a time. I tried typing it myself, but I wasn't able to focus well enough, and so my poor bride, my wife, typed it for me. We spent the better part of the Saturday getting that speech together into one form. Once it was together, I read it, and I thought it was truly remarkable. It was an inspiring speech, and I wanted to share it, so I sent it to Don Green at the foundation. Mr. Green read the speech, and it immediately triggered the idea for this book. So he put it together. He found the other articles for the book, and so he was the driving force, but I was kind of the inspiration for the book. Well, I think the enduring nature of Napoleon Hill's work has to do with the quality of it. That's the major reason why people read it and continue to read it. But the other reason is that it is encyclopedic. Now, what I mean by that is he is the only success writer to put it all together into a single document. If you look at James Allen or Hanel or Orson Swett Martin or even Samuel Smiles, you'll see that they all had a piece of the philosophy of success, but nobody put it all together into a single document. And because it is all together in a single document, it tends to resonate with more people. And that resonance leads to its success and enduring quality. Well, I think the one thing I found most interesting about this book was that it is unique. It's unique in the sense that it provides a sample of the full spectrum of Napoleon Hill's thinking from his early days until later on in life. For example, early in his life he called the principles of success requisites. Later on they morphed into full principles. Now the reason why they changed, of course, is he found out that if you applied the requisites, they worked, they always worked, therefore they were principles. So the uniqueness of this book is that it provides insight to Napoleon Hill's thinking as it changed over his lifetime. And I find that interesting. Well, Napoleon Hill was very fond of saying that the starting point of all success is desire, not a wish and not hope. Now there's an irony here, because the one thing that defines Napoleon Hill's legacy more than anything else, the one thing for which he stands in the minds of most of us who follow him, is hope. Napoleon Hill managed to instill hope in tens of millions of people. Now he did this by incorporating in all of his speeches and all of his books stories about people. Stories that show us what to do and what not to do. Guidelines, if you will. In that sense, they are parables of hope. Hope, of course, gives us reason for striving in life. Napoleon Hill's greatest speech, this book, follows in that same line. In a sense, it's a generator of hope. Well, Napoleon Hill was certainly driven by all the forces that drive young men, I think. However, looking at his life, I think there are two things that really drove him more than anything else. The first was the need to prove himself to his family. Napoleon Hill left home in 1902 and went to work in the coal mines for a year. Then he went to business school, became a bookkeeper, worked a couple of years. After that, he started to go into business. By 1922, he had started 10 businesses, and each of those businesses was prefaced home with a letter that was full of enthusiasm and great expectation. And of course, then he failed. During this same period of time, one brother became a surgeon, another brother became a lawyer, a half-brother had become superintendent of schools, and even his father had gone on to dental school. So Napoleon Hill felt a need to prove himself to his family. He also felt a need to prove himself to his wife's family, because each of those 10 business failures affected them directly when he sent his wife and 3 children home to live with them while he got started in other ventures. They also had invested in some of his ventures. Napoleon Hill had a lot to prove to them as well. Later on in life, though, Napoleon Hill had finally discovered, I think, that the only person he had to prove himself was to himself. Well, yes, Napoleon Hill had significant impact on my life. Not because of nepotism, I assure you of that, however. He impacted my life in the same way that he's had impact on other people. I read his book. In 1971, I was standing in the checkout line at the Piggly Wiggly in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I was very unhappy in life. I had been making my own decisions since I was 18, and I hadn't done very good decision making, I assure you of that. I saw a copy of Think and Grow Rich on the bookstand right there at the checkout counter. I bought the book, took it home, read it again. I hadn't read it since I was 12 when Napoleon Hill had given me a copy. But I read it again, and this time it had significant impact on me. I remember the hair stood up on the back of my hair and on the back of my neck. And then I realized that I held the recipe of success right in my hands. All I had to do was follow the recipe. I didn't understand the book then. I didn't understand it at all looking back at it, but I knew it would work. So I did what he told me to do. I picked a goal. I decided on a price I was willing to pay for it. I wrote a plan, paid that price, and followed through with it. 6.5 years later, I'm graduated from one of the finest universities in the country, and successes came my way for the next 25 years. However, one of the greatest reasons for failure in life is success. Because when you achieve a certain quantity of success, there's a tendency to drift through life. We trade our dreams for success, and that's exactly what I did. So about a quarter of a century later, the idea of going to medical school came to me. And I realized that that was a dream, and I decided that I would do it. Got a copy of Think and Grow Rich again, read it, took off for medical school. 6 years later, I graduated. Now, it's kind of funny. One of my friends told me before I retired and went back to school, he told me that, there's no way you're going to go to medical school, don't you? And I looked at him, and I said, well, I don't know, but what I was thinking, I know that I won't go if I don't try. That's what I was thinking. So when I got accepted for medical school, he was the first one I wrote to announce it. Napoleon Hill had significant impact on my life. Well, the legacy of Napoleon Hill is the hope that he generates in the millions of people who read his material. I've already mentioned that this hope is engendered by the stories that he tells and writes about, speaks about. But if you look more deeply at the stories, you'll see that each one of them embodies one or more of the principles of success. These principles can be grouped into at least 2 groups, maybe 3, but 2 groups for certain. The first group consists of those principles that are underneath complete control of the conscious mind. And the second group consists of those principles that stem from the subconscious mind. See, the subconscious mind is interesting. It doesn't know the difference between something that's real and it's not real. So it's possible to imprint things on the subconscious mind and make it believe that things are true, that perhaps aren't true. Now, why this is important is that if you take a definite major purpose and apply a positive mental attitude to it, you can imprint it upon the subconscious mind using visualization and affirmation. If you do this often enough, repeat it often enough, the subconscious mind will begin to believe what's put into it. And when this happens, the subconscious mind responds with a number of interesting things. Faith is one of the things that comes out. And if you act upon that faith, you have applied faith, you're enacting one of the principles of success. But also comes out is enthusiasm. It's easy to be enthusiastic over something you believe, you really believe you can do, something that you can achieve. And with enthusiasm comes a pleasing personality. So the relationship between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is really what makes all this work. It is why Napoleon Hill wrote and said many, many times that the only thing that you have complete control of is your mind. It is also why he said, what the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve.